All right, guys, welcome to PR Week. Public relations is always a fascinating topic to talk about because I think a lot of times, if you aren't in the media industry, you don't really understand the difference between PR and advertising. And PR plays such a essential role in our society in strategic communication and crisis communication. So, this week we're going to focus on that and the differences between PR and advertising and kind of where the industry is going. So, as you listen to this lecture, you read the chapter, I want you to think about how does marketing and public relations kind of blend together. And I think this is where society as a whole has problems differentiating them because, yes, they have similar tactics, ideas, end goals, but they are different. But what are the things that kind of blend them together that makes this confusion happen? When you think of PR, another thing that causes some confusion is that there's not really like a universally accepted definition of what it is because it covers a lot of things within the media industry. Um, and sometimes the things that PR professionals work on are a myriad and combination of one or two things. And so there's not one accepted definition of what PR is, but some would say it is publicity. Some would say that it is strictly research. Others would say it's about public affairs and what's going on. A lot of times in the media industry, we talk about it being media relations. So it's a way that media is handled with the public. We also have promotion, and then there's merchandising. So by just looking at this, you can say, oh, yeah, well, yeah, they're very similar to advertising or other things. So what is the main difference? Well, let's get into it. Uh, Throughout history, we've had examples of PR. The earliest that we have found is that there was a tablet dating back to the 1800s BC. It was discovered in the Middle East in Iraq, and it was this information bulletin of sorts of things that people needed to be aware of. And they talk about it being public relations instead of like a broadcast or advertisement, just because it was really defined as public information that the public really needed to know about, and not so much, stating news or anything. It was to inform an audience and a public, a society. And then, of course, as Americans, we all know that during colonial America and the revolutionary times, PR was a huge thing. Um, and it worked hand in hand with the newspapers at the time, trying to get people to understand why we were fighting this war and why we wanted to be an independent country. For example, the Boston Tea Party was a PR event to some extent, a pseudo event, because it was a way to attract public attention for the cause, the revolution, right? Um, it was a way to say, hey, look, they're taxing us for this tea. We're not going to take it. We're just dumping it in the harbor instead. And so PR has been around a long time. And it has changed a lot over the centuries and decades, but it's nothing new. Um, During the 1830s and the 1890s, so after the revolution and the Industrial Revolution, we see that PR is really a propaganda of some sorts, a publicity stage. And this is kind of the idea that people were like, oh, PR is just, supporting the company that they work for or whatever, spouting what they want. And this is where we get this idea. Um, but around the 1830s, as we talked about in newspapers and magazines, we started seeing mass circulation happening. More people were reading the newspaper, they were subscribing to magazines, they were becoming more informed. And so PR professionals and advertising professionals at the time were working together. And so there may have not been a distinct difference between an ad and a PR or public notice. They would look similar. And then, a couple of decades later, we're seeing PR kind of come to head with politics. In 1896, the presidential contenders at the time started to establish campaign headquarters. This was the first time that it was really a campaign that people were working on. And they weren't just talking to other politicians, but they were starting to issue news releases about things that they wanted to work on. And this is where we kind of see a shift, not really from advertising, because there was still this idea of propaganda behind it. But we see that they're trying to issue information to the public through the news. And that's where the relationship kind of started with that, with PR and the news industry. And it's also where we kind of see PR becoming into its own. It's not just another element of advertising or news. We have headquarters that are specifically tied to relaying information to the public. In 1889, Westinghouse Electric actually established the first corporate public relations department. And this was a huge deal. They had it for several years. And it was the first time that a company was doing their due diligence to inform the public about what was going on, not only with their company, but within the electrical industry. And it wasn't so much to, push the company. Yes, they wanted the sales, they wanted the money, but it was also just to say, hey, we want to talk to you from business to society. From there, advertising agencies saw the benefit of this, and they started offering not only advertising services, but public relations services. Again, this is kind of where that line blurs, right? And then in 1906, the Publicity Bureau opened up their own PR headquarters, and it was specifically open to help the railroad industry. At the time, the railroad industry and the government were at each other's throats about regulations that were happening and what would benefit the railroad versus what would benefit the government. And so they put together this PR firm to kind of help the railroad industry say, this is what we're opposed of, this is why we're opposed of it, and to let the public and the government know why. So it wasn't just them saying, oh, we just don't like it. Here, is some research that goes behind this. With that, we start seeing a lot of what is called early two-way communication come into play. And two-way communication is the fact that it's not just an ad, right? It's not just a news story. PR was slowly coming into itself to say, we want to get this information out to the public, but we want to hear from the public as well. And so that's where we get this communication line of information is sent out, it is decoded, and then feedback is sent. And this was the early start of that in the industry. President Woodrow Wilson was really the one that kind of stepped up and said, hey, we need a PR firm to help us support the war efforts, but we also need them to help us suss out what the public is thinking about the war in general so that we can help understand each other and help understand what the needs of each other are. During this time, we also see Edward Bernays kind of step up into a leadership role in this instance. He really wanted to separate the idea of PR and advertising. And he became known as the father of PR through this movement, even to this day. And his idea was he just really wanted PR to be ethical and to be a communication highway for the public to talk to big companies, to officials, and to really start a conversation about what was going on in society. We can fast forward to the 1930s, and as we're revving up for the Great Depression, and then World War II, FDR, or Franklin Delano Roosevelt at the time, was the president, and he really used PR as a way to inform the public about new policies that were going into effect because of the Depression, and how to help with that. One of those was the New Deal. And it was a way to explain to the public, hey, this is what's going on. This is why it will benefit you. And this is why we've decided to put these policies into place. And then about 6 years later, the American Council of PR was established. And this was just a way for publicity and public relations officials to be held accountable for what they were sending out, so that it wasn't just considered propaganda or advertisement, but to say, hey, this is accredited, it is information that you need to know about, and we want to hear back from you. Post World War II is when we really start seeing this idea of two-way communication go from a basic, communication wave to more of a complicated and integrated two-way communication. Because organizations and the government wanted their clients to know what was going on, but they also wanted to know what they were thinking. What could they improve on? What could they do to help them during this very integral time in history? And so they started not only just talking to clients or talking to people that worked within the industry, but they started doing more advanced research and figuring out ways that they could promote information and advertise information to the public. So that's a brief history. Lots of things have gone on between World War II and now with PR. And your chapter goes into it a little bit more. But when you think about how far it's come in just those few decades, and then what it is now, why do we need PR? And what does it look like today? Well, as technology advances, of course, we know we need more PR because we need the public to be able to access information and make decisions based on that information, right? We need to be able to communicate with big companies and people in charge so that it's not just a one-way dictatorship of information. We've also seen a humongous growth in middle class since World War II. And because of that, it's not just the rich and the poor, with the rich being knowledgeable and able to access information and to talk to people in charge, and the poor not being able to. But there was this new middle class that was coming in that wanted that information and had the money to an extent to access it and make a difference. We've also seen just the growth of organizations, a lot of that through technology, a lot of that through the growth of middle class and having more money in the society. And because of that, as organizations grow, they need someone that is in charge of communicating to the public. Again, we've also gotten more advanced research tools. And I think overall, there's more of a professionalism in the media industry of saying, we're not trying to hoodwink you. We really do want to communicate with you and have a discussion and let you know what's going on. So when you talk about public relations, the big word in that is a public, right? So what defines a public, and how are these companies relating to them or relaying information to them? Basically, public is any group of people that have a stake in some type of organization. So the public could be employees of an organization or a company. It could be stockholders. So when you think about employees, are who, are the everyday people that help the company run. Stockholders are those that are invested in the company. They both need information, but maybe sometimes that information is different. You have a community, and as we've learned throughout the semester, communities can mean a lot of different things, and can be a lot of different things to people, but sometimes different communities need different information. The media is a public in a way, right? So people who are journalists, who work in broadcast, newspapers, magazines, They are a public that also talks to a more broader public. And so the PR officials need to give them information. That's why we have press releases. The government itself is a public, and sometimes they need to be informed by bigger companies. Take, for instance, why we had a congressional meeting this week about TikTok. Whether you think that went well or not, the government wanted an informational session to ask questions about this company. Investment communities are similar to stockholders, and then customers. So customers need to know what's going on with products and organizations, because they're spending money with them, right? And they are being affected in some way by that product. There are several different types of PR firms or ways that PR organizations work. In society today, 240,700 people identify themselves as PR professionals. And virtually every company in the US at least has some kind of PR department, but those PR departments can work on different levels. So some of them are just an hourly rate, right? They are a PR company that charges an hourly rate to help with whatever a company needs. Sometimes they are kind of on a retainer, and they have a monthly fee and they can counsel as needed. Then you have fixed fee arrangements, which means that they are just working on one particular thing. There's a fee for it. And then once that particular item is completed, they are done. And then you have the collateral materials, which meaning they're just working on certain materials to help. So maybe you have a PR in-house PR department for a company, but maybe they don't have a graphic designer or they don't have a video person, and they can reach out and just get those particular materials that they need. When it comes to PR, there are a lot of different divisions of what they work on. The first one, of course, is community relations. They want to make sure that the community, whatever it is satisfied with an organization's work. They have counseling, which means that they're just taking this idea of a brand identity and trying to either create it, refine it, or present it to the public as this is who we are. Politicians have this, right? They want to make sure that people understand what rights they are trying to protect, what they are opposed of, and who they are as a person. Big organizations have the same thing. You also have people that are specifically in charge of development and fundraising. This is called social responsibility, and it's basically what are big companies doing outside of making money to in turn help a community or a society. Then you have people that are just in charge of talking to employee or members to make sure that they are happy, that they enjoy working or being involved in an organization, and that there's a communication. You have financial relations. So this is people who are just involved in the financial or money part of an organization or a company and providing that information to the public. You have government affairs and lobbying. So this is basically surrounding the government, making sure that people understand what the government is trying to do, what kind of bills are trying to be passed. And then lobbying, of course, is when certain organizations or companies are speaking directly to government employees, giving them money or access to different things to help sway their information. Industry relations is just making sure that state and federal regulations are maintained and that the public knows that. This is kind of where you get like media recalls to an extent. You have issue management, making sure that if something happens, the public is aware of it, that they know that you're trying to fix it. And, you're not trying to hide anything. This is where PR kind of gets a bad rap. If you think about what's going on, if there's a recall on your car, the car company has to tell you, they have to offer, free upgrades or whatever to fix the problem. If there is a recall on medicine, they have to let you know immediately because it could harm you, those kinds of things. Media relations is basically PR firms working with news outlets to make sure that information is getting out to the public. You have marketing communication, which is working to advertisers to sell a product. Recently, we have more diversity divisions popping up that are trying to work with minority groups to help engage relationships with them and understand what's going on with that community. Public affairs, of course, is interacting with officials or leaders. It's very similar to the government affairs, maybe on a smaller scale. Special events and public participation is when you're trying to build interest in a company, show them who you are, give them a little glimpse into things. And then, of course, there's the research entity, which is just trying to do the most research they can about what the public wants, what the company wants, and how to meld that together. So lots of things go into PR. One of the biggest trends we have seen in PR overall in the past couple of decades is cause marketing and social responsibility or corporate responsibility. Because as a society, we see all of these problems, right? We see people struggling with different things, and these corporations have all this money, and how are they using that money to give back to society? So why should we continue to be customers of theirs or members of their organization if they're not giving back? So it's said to believe 86% of consumers believe that companies should take a stand on a social issue. 77% of consumers feel a strong emotional connection to social responsibility companies. So think about a company that you really buy into. So some people really like Chipotle, right? And they don't really like Chipotle just because they like their food, but they like that they are socially responsible and how they get their product and how they're recycling back into the earth. And some people don't like how they do that. A lot of ag farmers don't agree with the PR that they've put out about that. So there's two sides to that, right? Some people really don't think that SeaWorld should be around, that they have done harm to animals, same with zoos, while others see that zoos are beneficial because they help animals that cannot go back out into the wild. They provide research, things like that. So there's always two sides to the coin, right? 79% of consumers are more loyal to socially responsible companies. Take, for instance, like the Tom shoe trend. People really got behind it because they were giving shoes to those in need in other countries. It has since died down a lot over the last decade or so. But it was like this idea of, oh, yes, we're going to give back to them because of that. 73% of consumers will publicly defend socially responsible companies because they feel like even if they do something bad, they are at least trying. 27% of US adults have stopped using a brand because of something negative they've learned about in the news. One of the biggest ones was probably Nike with Colin Kaepernick. A lot of people just did not believe in what he was doing, while others decided they really wanted to support Nike because of that. And so again, two sides of the coin. And PR is really in charge of helping with those types of situations. And then 33% of Americans think a company's reputation is just as important as the product it makes, and have purchased a product more than once because of that. So again, maybe like the Tom shoes idea, or giving back and, buying something that will help with a social cause, different things like that. Some different types of cause marketing that we've seen. Box Lunch, if you don't know, is like a pop culture store, but they are called Box Lunch because the corporation donates a meal to someone in need through the organization Feeding America for every $10 that people spend in the store or online. And so they use pop culture and their ability to pay for licensing to not only feed the idea of pop culture and obsessions that people have, but to also use that to give back. I'm sure you've all seen this, but Dawn soap is really passionate about rescuing and protecting wildlife, especially when they are affected by oil spills, because their product is safe to use on animals and humans to take that oil off of them and clean them up. Starbucks uses a college achievement program as a way to have cause marketing. If you work for Starbucks, you are eligible to go to Arizona State University. They will pay for benefit eligible employees to do that. And they don't have to pay for tuition. So it's a way, like, we understand that you have to work full time, but we want to give back and still allow you to go to school. And there are other organizations that do that, and it's usually through a partnership with the college. We also have Red Nose Day. If you haven't seen this, it's kind of died down over the past couple of years, but basically it's this nationwide campaign to end childhood poverty around the US and in other parts of the world. Walgreens is a big supporter of Red Nose Day. Celebrities get behind it, and they will do different things to promote it. Sometimes it's an older show coming back for like an episode specifically about Red Nose Day, or it's about doing commercials about it with big names. And it's just to get the idea out. And then, of course, I've talked a lot about Toms. I'm a huge fan of Toms. I think they're the most comfortable shoe ever. But I've also met the CEO of Toms and the founder, and I've heard him speak. And I think he had a good idea when he started, and I think it's kind of changed over the last couple of decades, but it's still overall a good idea. But basically, if you don't know, Toms was a shoe company that provides a third of its profits to what is called grassroots good organizations. To begin with, it was to give shoes to children in need in other countries, but now they look at other key issues such as promoting mental health awareness, ending gun violence, and increasing access to opportunity throughout the world. So how does that relate to the public in general? We've kind of talked about what PR is and what it does, but what's it do for the public, and where is it going in the future? You're seeing a lot of companies and PR firms talk about globalization and specializing in the idea of helping the world overall. There's a lot of foreign ownerships in a lot of PR firms, whether in the US or the US is involved in other countries. And it's really just to try to say, hey, we're trying to make the world a better place to be involved and communicate not only with one country, but multiple countries. Sometimes they specialize in something to try to bring awareness to it. One of those specializations is called greenwashing. And this is where a company will say that they are very involved in the idea of climate change and trying to help fix that. So they will, release a chemical-free type product, or they're doing better to go out and do more to help make our world more green. Sometimes it's legitimate, but for the most part, we have seen through research that greenwashing is just an advertisement of some sorts to make you think that they are doing better. We're also seeing, along with globalization as a tactic, convergence. And, we talked about convergence the first week or so in this class, and how technology has advanced so much that it's not just, one entity of media, but all of them combined. And the same is going with public relations. What used to be, they would hold an event for a company, or they would send out a news release, has really grown into a form of advertising and a social media presence, where they are sending out like video news releases. They have spokespeople talking on social media or the internet. They're holding, their own press conferences, things like that. And so they're really taking this idea of convergence and going with it. It's no longer this communication thread through media outlets, but rather straight to the source of the public. With that, we get a lot of new ideas of PR online. One of those is integrated marketing communications, or viral marketing. Again, this is kind of where the line blurs between advertising and PR. But you see that a lot of PR efforts are used through viral marketing or social media to create discussion or cause people to think about things. And they use that through viral marketing. One of the first, probably, it wasn't really viral, I would say, when they started, because it was just through television ads and going and talking in different publics, but like Mothers Against Drunk Driving became a really powerful tool for PR, and they continue to be a powerful tool online as well, releasing videos about different things like that. But their PR efforts are there to try to make something viral, so that people are talking about it and they're making decisions based on that information. Blackfish was also kind of a viral marketing thing, right? When it came out on Netflix, it was a documentary that talked about the orcas at SeaWorld, and whether you bought into the hype or not, it was talked about. And so there's those kinds of different things. The Met Gala is also kind of a PR effort, right? To bring awareness to society and what is considered on trend. A lot of viral marketing companies went against Kim Kardashian using Marilyn Monroe's dress at the Met Gala last year. And so we're seeing kind of the tail end of that come back this year with them being banned from the Met Gala. And so the internet is really powerful when it comes to things like this. Of course, the internet isn't the only thing. We have our own electronic devices, giving people a way to communicate with companies, to either praise them or give them negative feedback. And because of that, the public really has a greater sense of involvement with companies or organizations now, because there's not a middleman with communication anymore. They can speak directly to the source. One way that they do use a middleman now that is kind of deceiving is PR companies will use influencers to help build up information and relationships. So you're not getting the information through a media source per se, such as a newspaper or a news organization, but rather from somebody you've developed a parasocial relationship with online. And you can see that a lot of influencers will get behind a company or talk negatively about a company, depending on if they're paid for to do that or if they really truly believe it. Sometimes they just want you to be aware of what's going on. And so when you think about PR, think about how brands use influencers to really build relationships with you as a consumer through them. So PR has had some ups and downs through its conception. We've seen some of them in this PowerPoint in your chapter, but Edward Bernays, who was considered the father of PR, really advocated that the industry police itself, and that they really worked on being ethical and providing information that wasn't backhanded and trying to persuade the public in an unethical way. But even through his attempts at trying to police the PR industry, research shows that only about 12% of the public trust a public relations company or press release, and 69% do not. Some just ignore it, right? And so how do you feel about that? Do you really trust PR firms and what they're doing, or do you feel like it's just another advertisement? And I think sometimes it just depends on the company, what they're doing to get the information out, and what the information is, right? Today in the US, PR professionals outnumber journalists 4-1. So for every journalist out there trying to get information, there's 4 PR people trying to give them information and sway them to write a story. Within the industry of PR, their own research shows that 28% of PR professionals would manufacture news if it benefited their client, and 54% are willing to tell white lies to try to get the public's attention or money. And this is kind of where we get to the point where nobody trusts media, right? Because a journalist may take that information and publish it, not doing their due diligence to fact check, and then therefore they are considered to be a part of this little white lie. about 75% of the news we receive begins as PR, so through news releases. And then just as an example, in 2007, Walmart and Sony's PR operations were discovered to have paid for fake bloggers to promote their brands, so like mommy bloggers, leading to the rise of people wanting more transparency. So a lot of this comes down to like when you see ads or people talking about things on social media, they have to say, oh, I'm paid for this. Or they can just say, if they're not being paid for it, they can say, this is just my honest opinion about what's going on. So as we continue through this chapter and kind of think about what PR means to us personally and as a media professional, I want you to think about how do influencers use aspects of PR in their own work, not necessarily through another organization, but how they're promoting themselves, how they are getting people to follow them, and are they being genuine about it? So a lot of people follow like Charlie D'Amelio and her sister on TikTok, or they did during the pandemic. And some people believe that, she's very genuine about the things that she talks about, that she's very truthful. They did have some, bad PR going against them at some point. And so how do you kind of feel like they use PR to help people follow them? Same goes for the Kardashians, right? Some people absolutely love them, think they are American, idols and royalty. Other people are very disgusted with them, but how do they make the good and bad PR work for them? And so kind of think about that when you think about social media and its impact on the PR industry. When it comes to influencers and PR, some things to think about. 60% of marketers say that influencers offer a better return on investment than many traditional campaigns because of the parasocial relationships they have with their followers. Influencer marketing is highly targeted. And so it's reaching people that are interested in a product or service or an organization. And so they have a higher chance of converting customers because of that. And it makes sense, right? If you follow somebody and you trust their opinion, you're more likely to follow their advice on products or organizations and their thoughts on it versus just a general campaign. And when influencer marketing is incorporated into a PR strategy, we find that a lot of influencers become powerful advocates for a brand. I know when Trump was in office, a popular bag company called Harvey's, that a lot of pop culture people liked, got bad PR because they were investing in Trump's campaign. And so what I saw was a lot of Disney people who had invested in Harvey's and had owned Harvey's bags were trying to get rid of them. They were selling them, they were throwing them away because they didn't believe in what they were doing. And so they became a very powerful advocate for that brand or against that brand, right? And finally, 62% of consumers trust influencers more than they do celebrities. And so even though influencer status is becoming almost celebrity-like, we still feel like they're more human than, like, say, the Kardashians. And so therefore, if you have an influencer helping with a brand, they can sway more people. So that's PR in a nutshell. Again, this is a short chapter introduction to it, but it gives you an idea of how it fits into the media industry and how PR works with the public.